Hello, everyone. I'll just give us a couple of minutes for people to join in from the waiting room. In the meantime, welcome to the US Equestrian's Drugs and Medication webinar. We're excited everyone has made the time today. This seems to be a popular subject, and we're happy to have all of you here. I'm just watching the participant numbers go up a little bit before I introduce people. So we're here today with Dr. Stephen Schumacher, who's the Chief Veterinary Officer for US Equestrian, and Dr. Trisha Dowling, who's a Veterinary Pharmacologist for Equestrian Canada, and also a Professor Emerita at Western College of Veterinary Medicine. Dr. Dowling's also a multidiscipline rider at various levels of various sports. And we're happy to have both of their perspectives here. So the way that this is going to work is that we have a number of questions here that we'll run through in a slideshow form that have either come from people who signed up for the webinar or are common questions that we get from members routinely outside of just this process. And then at the end, we'll open it up for the questions from the people who are on the webinar now. So those of you who didn't get your questions answered in the first round. You'll want to use the Q&A button down at the bottom of your Zoom window, and that question will go in to the queue, and we'll try to get to as many as we can before our hour is up here. We will be posting a recording of this on our website. This will be on the Drugs and Medications landing page at uscf.org in the Forms and Publications section. I usually have those available to me after a couple of days. I'll also be uploading it to the USEF YouTube. So if you know anybody who wasn't able to tune in today, then they should be able to reach it that way. If we have questions that we don't get to, either submitted during the live event or anything that was submitted beforehand that we don't have time for, I will be following up with everybody individually to make sure that I can get you the answers and the resources that you need. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into our first slide here with the very basics of our program. So one of the things that we get asked most commonly when it comes to drug testing is, how many drugs do you test for? And Dr. Schumacher, maybe you can take a run at that one.
Yeah, thanks again for letting me join, and for everyone who's joined for the webinar, I appreciate it. As far as the first question, how many drugs do you test for? It's an open-ended question. We test multiple different platforms with different technology. There are hundreds of drugs in each library. Libraries are what the laboratories would have for a specific fingerprint of a drug. And so, they're constantly adding to that library. It's far in the hundreds, if not thousands, of different substances that they can detect. The level of sensitivity it changes a little bit, but it would definitely be in the hundreds, if not the high hundreds that we test for. So, Natalie, I don't know if you want me to take the next questions or.
Yeah, go for it. That's one of the things we get asked about a lot is why do you test for metabolites, and what even is a metabolite?
Yeah, so a metabolite is a breakdown product of a parent drug. Some drugs are excreted unchanged. In other words, they go out in the urine in the same form that they came in as. They're not broken down. But a lot of drugs, most drugs, I would say, I'll defer to Dr. Dowling as well, but most drugs are changed in the liver or kidneys or body tissue in the bloodstream itself will be changed, and it's the body's way of getting rid of the medication. We talk about effects of drugs, but this is the way drugs are eliminated from the body. A metabolite, some of them can be active, some of them can be inactive, but they're definitely a sign or definitive sign that a horse or a human has experienced or has been exposed to a specific medication. most drugs are, well, I don't want to say most drugs, but a lot of drugs are rapidly metabolized, and so you rarely find the parent drug. You actually, unless you're pulling blood downstream of the administration. So, that's why we detect metabolites. It's a standard, laboratory standard and regulatory standard in equine drug testing and human drug testing, and actually the FAA, when they look for medications in pilots, they're also looking for metabolites. It's a standard.
Great. You mentioned this earlier with the discussing the different sensitivities, but we know that testing technology has really ramped up a lot in recent years. And one thing that I hear asked pretty commonly across different horse sports is, isn't modern testing really sensitive? And how do you kind of make sure that you're not that you're looking to an appropriate sensitivity and not run the risk of finding something that you don't need to find because of it being in there in such a small amount?
Absolutely, and that's a great question. Zero tolerance used to be, if we detected the drug at all, it's going to be a positive finding, and that had to do with instrumentation that was not nearly as advanced as it is today. Now we can find drugs much further out from the time of administration than we ever used to. But we realize that frequently just the detection of the drug, or the parent drug or metabolite may not correlate with activity. And so there are different administration studies that are done to establish detection levels. And I think a great example is that when we went to a single non-steroidal drug, in other words, you're only allowed to have one drug in the horse at a time of the 7 quantitatively restricted non-steroidal medications. We had to determine how long we wanted them off that second medication. 72 hours was the determination. And so we adjusted our levels. We can detect those non-steroidals much further out than 72 hours. But we implemented levels. So if the second non-steroidal is below a certain level, it's considered a negative test, and that would be considered at 72 hours. So while zero tolerance used to be, if we found anything, it was a violation. That's not really the case right now, just because the sensitivity instrumentation has gotten so great that we can detect amounts of drugs further out. It's interesting because you talk about analytical chemists likes to go as low as they can, and in the regulatory field, we absolutely take into account the potential for a lack of an effect.
Great.
And
And I know that there are some very rare substances that are like actually still a zero tolerance, right? Like as far as like the really serious barbiturates, for example, is still, there is no level of that we're going to be okay with for the only the really, really serious stuff, right?
that's absolutely correct. And anything that's truly prohibited in the horse, that shouldn't be in the horse at any time of competition, those would be considered still zero tolerance. I apologize. I was more addressing the sensitivity for, some of the medications that were considered legitimate therapeutic substances. But you're absolutely right. There are certain drugs that should never be in the horse, and there's no tolerance for them being found. So any amount of those drugs could be prosecuted as a violation.
Great. Let's move on for the moment to hair testing. We've had a few questions about that in advance, and I've got a couple that have been submitted here live as well. So first of all, let's address how, well, actually, very, very first of all, let's talk about why we've started pulling hair samples to begin with.
Yeah, I think that's essential to the discussion. Probably about a year and a half or so ago, maybe around that time, we had feedback from the industry that individuals were using euthanasia solution, which is pentobarbital and phenytoin. And this is a solution that's highly concentrated, and it's used to euthanize horses, euthanize small animals, cats, dogs, and horses. When we were confronted with that, obviously it's absurd. It's ridiculous. It's the most egregious form of abuse, in my opinion, is to expose a horse to a euthanasia solution. That the only time that they may be getting that is when they're being put down, which is obviously a very sad time. But to give it to a horse to get it to compete better it blows my mind. So taking this information, we developed a process, or we developed a methodology to try and catch people that are doing this to the horses. And it was essentially, there's a large outcry in the industry. Hair testing has presented it as a means to detect this use. And so we did have that rule change that was passed in July and went into effect July 1st of this year, which would allow us to submit hair samples for analysis. There is recently we did collect some hair samples. The whole concept is trying to pull hair samples out as very similar to pulling manes, which is what, in our industry happens quite a bit. What we've tried to do is also reflect back on the recent collections, and we're trying to alter our procedure to make it less visually traumatic. But the hair samples that we need to require or need to collect per laboratory requirements are about the diameter of a number 2 pencil. And they want, instead of just cutting in the mane, they want the bulb actually, which is the follicle itself, which provides more of a medium for drug detection. So the samples are pulled. They're pulled from the underside of the mane. We have also pulled them from the tail. We did that last week, and the horse was unfazed by it. And so we've collected several samples. We're going to continue to modify our approach, and obviously horse welfare that's what we're trying to do here, to stop the use of this drug. And we also don't want to put horses at risk for the collection process. So the next, so how should hair samples be pulled? Again, it's very, very similar to pulling of mane. One thing that can be done is we've also looked at pulling from multiple sites along the mane. We had one suggestion when we were doing hair collection about letting the trainers or the grooms actually collect the samples in our presence. And we've talked about it, and we're going to process that. But I can tell you, my opinion is I'd be all for it. They know better about the horse. As long as we get the hair samples, they can select them. They can pull from different spots and make it less tedious. So as far as how long can hair detect substances, and I know there are some people that are out there that are concerned about the permitted drugs. We're not looking for the legitimate therapeutic substances. We're not looking for those in hair samples. We're looking for the bad stuff, the stuff that shouldn't be in a horse at any time, regardless of whether or not they're actively competing or not. These are not substances that they would be exposed to in the environment, or unusually prevalent in the barn, or other horses may be getting them. We're only looking for several bad substances. How long can the drugs remain detectable? They get deposited in the hair follicle, and then they grow out in the actual shaft of the hair. And so, we're looking back more or closer to the time of competition. We're not looking 4, 5, 6 months back. We're looking for closer to the time the horse was actively competing. But how long can they remain detectable? It can be months. So.
We've had a couple of questions here live, and I've seen this question go around social media too. Are combs and tools being used to collect the hair sample brand new or sterilized? And I know that that relates to the way the hair sample is actually tested, right?
Yeah, and absolutely the combs that are used for the collection of the hair samples are soaked in chlorhexidine um, before and after each hair pull. So they are sterile, or I don't want to say sterilized, but they're definitely cleaned. There's obviously the biosecurity risk, but we're looking the drug is being looked at in the follicle and the shaft of the hair, not on the outside of the hair.
Great. We've also had quite a few questions, as we anticipated we might, about a video of a hair sample collection from last week that some people found to be not quite standard or uncomfortable. And I just wondered if you could address, like, is that typically how those collections are supposed to go? And if not, what is supposed to look, what does a standard collection typically look like?
Yeah, we videoed each collection that we've done. I know that the one that was circulating around showed a horse that was essentially giving the pressure and leaning into the veterinarian collecting the sample. And that horse was a horse that did not like mane pulling. But the owner actually afterwards, I think she was a little surprised at the the collection, how hard the collection was, but was also surprised that her horse didn't react. The horse is up, ears are up all the time, and essentially as a veterinarian, you realize when you're causing pain to a horse, there's typically an avoidance response. They let you know it, and that wasn't evident in that video. I think also what we're finding is with these hunters, when we are collecting our samples, their manes have been pulled, and sometimes they have been pulled a great deal. And so the only hairs left are the ones that are actually firmly entrenched and are a little more challenging to get out. I don't know if we're going to start looking more at tail, which is done on the underside of the tail. But yeah, it I could tell you that the horses that had the hair collection were not responsive to the collection. That horse was the probably most significant, where it just kind of leaned into the veterinarian and but didn't react otherwise.
So let's move on now to supplements, because we have quite a few questions around that as well. Dr. Dowling, you can probably give us some perspective from your experience as a veterinary toxicologist. Um, we get a lot of questions about, I have this supplement, or I'm thinking of putting my horse on a particular type of supplement, and I want to know if I need to be worried about a positive test. And that's not always such an easy question to answer.
Well, I guess it is easy in that the answer is yes, but there's a lot of things that go behind it. So I'm actually a Texas A&M graduate. I got a degree in animal science and then went to vet school there. And so I've had many educational experiences in nutrition. And I'm a big believer that the big feed companies pay people with PhDs in nutrition a lot of money to balance their diets appropriately. So I am not a believer in supplements. And in fact, the only thing I use is electrolytes in my 100-mile endurance horses, where there definitely is a need for that. So if one thinks that one needs a supplement, these are some of the things you definitely need to think about. Can a supplement contain prohibited substances? Like I said, the easy answer is yes. And it breaks down, is it an intentional or is it an accidental prohibited substance that's in the supplement? So I tell my students that I teach, and I have a whole course on drugs and performance horses. I teach them that if any kind of a product is claiming that it either can rev a horse up or calm a horse down or put on muscle, it is extremely difficult to do that with something that's not going to be prohibited by most sport organizations. because then you are not having horses compete on their own merits with good training, good conditioning, that sort of thing. It violates the spirit of our equestrian sports. So when it comes to intentional, or when it comes to supplements, it's not like a drug. So in the US, there's the Food and Drug Administration. They oversee and they approve every drug product. And you can tell it's an approved drug. If you look at the label, you will see the letters NADA for New Animal Drug Approval. And you can actually look up that number online and you can see all the information that the company had to submit to the government so that they could get that a drug approved. So there's toxicology, pharmacology, clinical use, all that kind of good information. If anything is amiss with a bona fide approved human or veterinary drug product, the drug company has to stand behind that. In fact, the FDA comes in and they just check randomly every now and again and make sure that that product is what it says it's going to be and what the expiry date is. Is that really good enough? It's still potent for whatever the 6 months that's on the expiry date or whatever. And the drug companies have a vested interest. If something about their product causes a problem, they're going to be there for you and they're going to fix it. Whatever it takes to make things right, they're going to stand by it for you. On the other hand, when it comes to a supplement, both in the US and Canada, it's a little bit more the Wild West. Pretty much anybody can decide that they want to start making a supplement and they're going to put these different ingredients in them. Supplement companies are not supposed to make drug claims. I see this all the time because the big government agencies have a little bit more pressing issues than what weird stuff horse people are giving to their horses. But I see claims like it's going to fix their asthma, it's going to prevent laminitis, it's going to fix their metabolic syndrome or whatever. They technically shouldn't be making those claims because those are drug claims. But you see it happen all the time. So they try to get you to use their product because they're saying this stuff. And you need to look into their documentation. I am one of those kind of people. If somebody tells me that this is the best thing since sliced bread, I go online and I look at the information they're providing. And there's a supplement out there that kind of makes me crazy because their website advertised decades of research. And I'll wing this to Dr. Schumacher. How many peer-reviewed publications do you think you should have in horses with decades of research? 2.
Hundreds.
Yeah, we should have hundreds, and we have 2, and they're very poor quality. One, there were other ingredients besides what this supplement was, and the other one was not placebo-controlled. So unless you dig in behind that, it's really easy to believe when they say, oh, research and this great veterinarian or this great trainer or this great rider says, it made Flicka jump higher or run faster or whatever. But, really, where is the science? If this is true, it can be proven with a good study. So you want to look into your products and see, do they really meet the claims that they have? So sometimes when they put their ingredients on the label, they will put, herb extract and this and that and some minerals or things like that. And in Canada, just like the United States, if people call into us and ask, in Canada, it's me, they run the label by me, and I will look at the list of ingredients and I'll go, I don't see anything here that I think will be a problem with influencing the behavior of a horse. However, it's buyer beware because there's no guarantee on that. And so that's how we always end it. And there have been lots of instances where a little something extra was added into it to get that claim of bigger muscles or being more calm and that sort of thing. And then somebody unfortunately ends up with a positive test. On the other hand, there's also lots of cases of inadvertent additions to the ingredients. And some of these cases are just wild. A very well-known eventer was going to win a Triple Crown of eventing, lost $1 million bonus prize money because they were using a vitamin E supplement that unfortunately contained a very prohibited, very potent tranquilizer. And this stuff was being homemade in somebody's kitchen, And when you read the details of the case, they were mixing it in a wooden bowl with a spoon. And then it was put in non-sealed containers, non-child-proof caps. An Olympic caliber rider was using it. Your mind kind of boggles. Why would anybody take a chance on a product like that? And it cost them dearly. So there's lots of cases of that. We had an endurance rider who got a positive for caffeine. They were using a product that was labeled as a gentle formulation as a calming agent. Well, that violates the spirit of the drug rules for endurance, where we're not supposed to be really using anything except oats, hay, and water. And the funny part was that there was supposed to be a green tea extract in it that was decaffeinated. Well, oops, one of the suppliers forgot to decaffeinate it, and this product actually contained 11% caffeine. It wasn't a gentle formulation, it was a no-dose formulation. So there's a number of these examples. One of the best one involves a rather famous Australian event rider who was using some electrolytes at a pre-ride for one of the Olympics, and his horse tested positive for pentobarbital, that component of euthanasia solution, and it was in his electrolytes. And I never found the rest of the story of how that got into some electrolytes, but again, very serious violation. So that's why we worry more about supplements and that potential for ending up with a violation than we do with a bona fide drug product. So look on your products, look for those NADA numbers so that you know you can put your faith in government oversight and the pharmaceutical industry.
On that topic, Dr. Dowling, sorry, before you continue, we'd had a question come in from somebody who says they're seeing abbreviations A in NADA or INAD for abbreviated new animal drug application or investigational new animal drug. I've personally not come across those, or what should somebody think if they see that as far as their level of concern they should have?
No, somebody's doing their homework. I wasn't to get that detailed. So A is for abbreviated. So that's where maybe the product had a claim for cows and now they've got one for sheep. Or it was labeled for coughs and now it's labeled for tonsillitis or something. So it's an added one. They didn't have to go back and do everything. And then the INADA is one that's sort of still in the approval process. The FDA allows some products to start being marketed because they're so needed, even before they've got the full dossier on everything. So they're just subtle variations. So as long as it's the NADA, you can still have that faith.
Gotcha. And Dr. Schumacher, when somebody comes to you with a question about, is this supplement legal, yes or no? I mean, Dr. Dowling has already sort of gone through like, yes, but is very often sort of the start of the correct answer. But what process do your staff ask people to go through? Because I know that a lot of times it depends on like what container do they actually have with them, because that can make a difference as far as labeling.
Yeah, it's a great point. We request them to also provide a list of ingredients or the label, and so we can compare apples to apples. Some supplements you may end up seeing different labels on the same product. They may be from different time frames. Sometimes we'll also see on supplement labels that they'll actually say a blend of substances, a proprietary blend, and we don't know what's in it. And so we'll always caution people about that. But no, we look at the list of ingredients and look at them each individually, because we do know that labels can change, ingredient lists can change. And so we try and look at it each time when we're posed the question.
Great. We have had some people ask, because Dr. Dowling mentioned the test for one of the barbiturates in an electrolyte supplement, and are asking, well, wait a minute, what does that got to do with the hair sampling and the concern
That
about
was
collapsing?
FEI and years ago.
Right, and this this is a separate issue that we've been working to address more recently based on information we were getting about use in the hunter jumpers. Without knowing a lot about dosing, the hair testing seemed like the best way to be sure that we could find it regardless of when it was given. Is that right?
Yes, that's why we pursued that.
Gotcha. I'm sure we'll get more. Actually, we had this is a good question. We had somebody pop up with one. What confidence can we place in a label claim that says specifically product won't test? Because I do see that.
You can't.
Yeah.
You can go back to the Hong Kong show jumpers who all got busted for capsaicin for a topical product that has long had won't test on its label. So not much, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I want to add to that. And frequently we see FEI approved or show safe or just even racing or HISA approved. HISA, FEI, USEF, we don't endorse, approve products whatsoever. And so anytime that they show safe is not something that came from us. It's something that's been propagated in the supplement world to try and give people confidence that it's a safe product. But it's not something that we put on any sort of supplement following a review. Same thing with FEI and HISA. And HISA is the Horse Racing Integrity Safety Authority, or HIWU, which is the enforcement arm, which is the Horse Racing Integrity Welfare Unit. So,
and Equestrian Canada as well. And that goes back again to the difference between a drug regulated, supplement unregulated. No drug company could put something like that on their label. The FDA is very specific about what goes on the label. And every bit of that has to be proven by science. If they say safe for use in pregnant mares, they have to have tested it in pregnant mares. And with the supplements, you know, they're pretty much free to put whatever they want on their labels. I looked at one product that they had me look at the label, and then it basically said on it, if this causes a problem for you, don't call us. And I thought, how can I have any confidence in your product if you won't stand behind it, if I get in trouble with it?
We've had a couple questions, and I know this gets more into the regulation side as far as processing through the hearing committee and that kind of thing beyond what you typically deal with, Dr. Schumacher. But we've had people ask, well, you know, if the source of a drug positive can be found in a supplement, you know, is that not considered as part of the process? And I know that depending on the situation, it can be, but there still has been a positive test. So I know that gets to be kind of part of what the investigations and hearing process are there to determine, right?
yeah, absolutely. That can be mitigated. Depends on what the purpose of the supplement was, what the drug was found. Those portions of the finding or the investigation can be used in mitigation for a penalty. Yes. Are they used all the time? Again, it's dependent upon the hearing committee's approach to it, but in reviewing it, yeah, at the same time, if you know, someone really had no idea it was in the supplement, a great example is ractopamine. There were a couple pauses for ractopamine several years ago. They were, you know, two at one dressage event, and it was traced back to a supplement that was for digestion. In no way was, you know, the riders of both horses, were they intending to use ractopamine on their horses. The supplement company actually identified that the supplement was being produced in a facility that also did pig feed, and they were not cleaning out their line well enough. And so that's why we had a couple of pauses for ractopamine. So all of that can be used in mitigation, but I can't comment on what will actually the end result will be. But I do know of cases that have been mitigated because we have found or identified the source.
Gotcha. We have questions in several other subject areas, so I know that we have questions that have come in about supplements. I'll circle back to those because I don't want to not get to some of the others that we have that are not supplement specific. So we've had a few people who have asked us about medication report forms, how they know when they need to fill them out, and what's the easiest way to make sure that that gets done appropriately.
Yeah, so medication report forms, just to explain, is that frankly, I think we have a relatively liberal drug rule in the world from a regulatory aspect, in that we allow certain medications, pharmaceutical, substances, to be used up until 24 hours prior to competition if they're used for legitimate therapeutic purposes. Nowhere else in the world are these permitted. However, I'm very proud of the fact that we compete our horses longer, older, and frankly, in my opinion, I think we compete them pretty safe. And the biggest thing is we don't compete them at speed. And so for the most of our disciplines in our breeds. So we allow certain medications to be used therapeutically up until the time of competition. It's General Rule 411. And it's for, again, as I mentioned, legitimate therapeutic use. When you should file a medication report form is after the last administration of that substance, but before the horse goes into the ring to compete in that 24-hour period. We do have some guidelines, some guidance as far as medications, how long they'll be remain in the horse's system or be testable. Frankly, I would say call us. Call the 1-800 number or email us and make those inquiries as far as whether or not your substance or that substance that was administered to the horse would qualify for GR 411. I think it's also important to say that, a lot of people say, what can I give my horse? And we're not there to provide that advice. What we're there to provide is, hey, whatever your veterinarian said, hey, this horse needed a time at this time to prevent or treat, diagnose an emergency issue or a medical condition. What we're there to do is provide information about how to get that horse back into competition and be compliant with the rules and document that administration. So as far as when you should use a medication report form, definitely give us a call or send us an email. And that's the easiest way.
And we had one question submitted also from somebody asking like how we could make the medication report form easier for people to access, whether it's on our website or on the USEF app.
Yeah, the USEF app I know is in development. I will tell you what I tell everyone that calls. Frankly, the best way to find that medication report form login, the web page, is to type into your browser USEF space medication report form, and it's the first link that will pop up. Then you can file those, you can fill it out. The necessary information will be the horse's name, the competition that you'll be competing at next, the trainer's name, the veterinarian that prescribed the medication, their contact information, the actual specific medication, the dose and time of administration, the date, and then you can submit that. You'll receive a email back. Sometimes we find out that they'll go to junk email or what have you. So check your junk file, but that email back should be within 10 minutes or so. If you failed to get a response back or documentation that your medication report form has been filed, definitely give us a call. So
yes, and I know
as far as making it easier, I think that's the easiest way to get to it.
Yes, I know that we're working on making it easier to access in the app, but that's a good sort of way to make sure you've gotten to it in the meantime. Okay, so our last slide here has got sort of a range of questions across different subject areas, and I've obviously got more coming in as well. But the first one here on this next slide has got an example of a question that we see a lot around allergies and or hives. You know, so what if my horse has allergies and is routinely on an allergy medication, or they pop up with hives and they need dexamethasone? Why are these medications restricted? Because it seems like they would be key to horse welfare, and what can I do to keep my horse healthy in this competition environment?
You know, for allergies, the biggest thing is for the antihistamines. Different generation of antihistamines. Some of them have sedative effects. Diphenhydramine, which is Benadryl, is a great example. Hydroxyzine, which is used a lot in horses, also is a first generation antihistamine and can cross the blood-brain barrier and cause sedation. But here's a throwback to the metabolite question earlier was what's interesting is hydroxyzine actually is metabolized to cetirizine, and cetirizine is an active metabolite. It's also a different antihistamine that's marketed for humans under Zyrtec. It doesn't as readily cross the blood-brain barrier, so it's less likely to provide sedation, and that's why they market it in humans like that. But it still can still has the potential. As far as the treating of hives, dexamethasone, we have retained the use of dexamethasone, and even with the 12-hour rule, where we don't allow horses to be injected within the 12 hours prior to competition, we do have an exception for dexamethasone for the treatment of hives. And the specifics for that are the fact that the veterinarian has to administer it. It has to be, the recommendation for the dose is 0.5 mgs per 100 pounds. So a 5 milligram dose for a 1,000-pound horse, administered no closer than 6 hours prior to competition, has to be intravenous. And a medication report form needs to be filed to document that administration. So I think we do have safeguards in place, or the potential use for some of these medications that are used for allergies or specifically for hives. And the reason there was restricted is because some of them can cause sedation. So in horses and in people.
Great. We had a question specifically about ashwagandha, but obviously we've had questions about herbal products and ingredients generally. I know you can address it, you can't sort of have one blanket statement that addresses all of them, but since somebody did ask about ashwagandha, can you talk about why that's on the prohibited substance list?
Yeah, it's prohibited because it does have potential for sedative effects. There are a number of other plant or herbal preparations that also have sedative effects. Valerian root is a great one. Valerianic acid comes from a plant. Reserpine actually comes from a plant as well. So anything that has the potential to affect the CNS is considered prohibited. But I wanted to ask Dr. Dowling if you had any other comments regarding the allergies or even ashwagandha or the effects.
Oh, thank you. I was going to try to jump in there on the ashwagandha. So just because something's natural doesn't mean it's safe. And in fact, most people die of natural causes, is my always rebuttal to that. And the ashwagandha, in addition to potentially having these sedative properties, I also came across warnings where it could potentially cause liver damage. Now, that would be from human use, but who knows what it would do in the horse. And being a clinical pharmacologist, one of the things we really have to know as veterinarians is the species differences in how they handle drugs. And so if it causes liver damage occasionally in people, it could cause liver damage a lot in horses. We don't know because there's no studies behind something like that. So just remember that just because it's natural doesn't mean it's safe. And then along those lines, if a little is good, a ton is not necessarily better either.
The poison's in the dose.
Yes,
For-
Harry
for me,
Potter
it's
was correct. The dose makes the poison.
Yes, but I mean that brings up a good point. I don't know if we really hit on this, but this species difference. I know that there have been some questions about Equiox, which is Equiox is firocoxib, and it's a non-steroidal medication. It's been used. It's considered a coxib class drug, so it's more COX-1 sparing drug. But not to go into the pharmacology of it, just the species differentiation. For a 100-pound dog, the dose for firocoxib a day is 227 milligrams once a day. For a 1,000-pound horse, the dose is 45.5 milligrams. So you're talking about essentially 1/5 of the dose for an animal that weighs 10 times the same weight. It's so species, just because it works in one species doesn't mean it works the same way in another species. And Dr. Dowling brought up a great point. It can be toxic as well. Tylenol, acetaminophen has been used in horses. It can be used in different species. You give to a cat and you're going to kill it. So they lack an enzyme in their liver to deal with the negative metabolic properties of it. So there are a lot of differences, and that's what concerns me too about supplements. Is a lot of times the information that's put forth for a supplement, it may not have been put into a horse. It may have been used in another species or human, and they just think that those effects or what they consider potentially benefits are transferable across species, and that's not always the case. So it scares me sometimes, but yeah, there are some big species differences. So I'll be quiet, Natalie. Sorry.
You're fine. So the next one that we had gotten before the meeting is why don't we get a notification when our horse has passed a drug screen? And then I have a follow-up question from a couple of related questions we've been getting live as well.
Yeah, so we don't send out notifications of past tests, but we did implement probably about 7 or 8 years ago where you can get your barcode number and look up on the USEF website, and you can type that in, and you'll get either a cleared or pending. So you can find out if your sample has been cleared. But we do not at this time send emails out for the cleared samples. So probably the best way to find that barcode lookup is USEF space barcode lookup, and you can find that on our website.
And then when people do get notifications of positive tests, we've had a few people ask, whether, and if not, why not, the concentration of the level detected, is that included? And if it's not, why is it not included?
Yeah, so most laboratories, and Dr. Dowling may jump in here, but most laboratories, they are going to be accredited to a certain standard. And so they will quantify certain substances, but the rest of the testing is actually qualitative. They're just detecting the presence of the substance, and they'll have an estimated quantity. The difference is how many point curve they do, whether it's a 5-point curve or a 9-point curve, to determine to really finite narrow down that window of where that sample or how much of that drug might be in that sample. It's mostly from an accreditation standpoint that most of the drug testing out there is going to be qualitative testing, but it's not going to be quantitative. Now, under USEF rules, we have seven quantitatively restricted non-steroidal medications, and we also have a quantitatively restricted medication level for dexamethasone and for methocarbamol. So those will always be provided levels with a positive test. So.
We've had a lot of questions about how horses are selected for testing at the horse show. A lot of people asking about is there a world in which there'd be more competition results-based testing as opposed to random testing? And I know that that's something that there have been discussions going on about in planning for next year, right?
Yeah, the program has been around since 1970, and is primarily it's focused on being a deterrence as well as selecting random samples. But we've always given more focus on the placings and selections. And we're going to try and do that even more. I tell you that it's a challenge to get testing teams out there to collect samples. There's a shortage of veterinarians. There's a shortage of equine veterinarians. And it's a very challenging task in some venues. So we have to mix. I know there's a question or two about, doing it like a racetrack does it, which is just the first, second, and third place horse. In racing, it's usually the first place horse. And not to make it sound, that much different, but the difference is racetracks don't move. It'd be nice if we could get people to just show up at a racetrack for, the race starts at the post times at 4 o'clock. Our competitions, they move from venue to venue. They change based on type of competition. They're throughout the week. They're different times. Different events may be pushed in a schedule. It's a challenge to get personnel to every event, or to the events that we try to. But we are going to be focusing more on the upper level as far as the placings. We've always recommended to testing veterinarians that they not want to really select the 8th place horse. We really focus on first, second, third, fourth, but we're going to make that even more of a priority in the next year.
And we've had a few questions as well about the people who were collecting the samples at horse shows. What required qualifications must they have, and what kind of training are they required to go through before they are out and about doing those collections?
Yeah, the veterinarians we use veterinarians for the blood collection. They are not permitted to treat horses at competitions. They are not permitted to do any of that. They're only collecting a blood sample. In many states, a veterinary technician can do that. It's not considered practicing veterinary medicine, but we do require that they be licensed in their state, their home state, or equivalent. In other words, if they work for a university, they may not have to be licensed in that state, but they have state-supported licensure. So the technicians are typically anyone who has some ability with horses, understands the process. We do work with them to collect the urine samples, sealing the urine samples, as well as transporting or shipping the samples back to the laboratory. As far as the qualifications go, like I said, veterinarians, frequently we do have vet techs that work in the technician role, but that's not always necessary. So we have retired veterinarians that catch pee for us. So it can go the scope, but I can tell you that catching pee at AHSA horse shows helped put me through vet school.
So we've had quite a few questions about supplement companies and sponsorship, and I'm not sure whether this is something that you want to speak to, Stephen, or whether I need to speak to it. But we've had quite a few people say, well, why is one company or another company sponsoring a show? Why do they all sponsor USEF? We wanted to make clear to people there's only one supplement company that is a sponsor of USEF, and it does have, which is Platinum Performance, and it does have recommendations on their website about withdrawal times for substances that could potentially have any impact on testing. Shows are permitted to solicit sponsors on their own. That does not mean that they are working with us. Dr. Schumacher or Dr. Dowling, do you guys have any feedback on the sponsorship aspect of things? Because obviously people do see the signage, and I understand that it can get confusing.
Yeah, I see that in neither in the US or Canada. Is that meaning that the organization is endorsing the use of these products and you need to be using these products? And that was what some of the comments were, is, when they see these banners, they feel like, oh, well, this is something we should be doing. But then I thought about that, and I've also seen banners for Rolex and Land Rovers. And I don't own either one of those either, right? So it's a sponsorship. It's not an endorsement. That's a very big difference for that.
Great.
Unless you're driving a Land Rover or own a Rolex, or there's always some jewelry companies or something too, right?
No, fortunately, my experience ends with the D&M program, and I don't deal with the sponsorships. But my understanding is same as with Natalie, is that they're not, all these companies that may be apparent out there are not USEF sponsors. And I don't think we have anything in place to regulate the sponsorships that individual competitions have.
We've had a few questions as well when it comes to herbal products generally. When there is an absence of research on an herbal ingredient that might be in a supplement, when there's an absence of research on that on horses, and this might be sort of a rabbit hole, what is the sort of philosophy with saying we're going to restrict the usage when we don't have a study either way that outline safety or impacts on an equine body? Because I know that sometimes we'll look at impacts from other species, and how does that sort of determination get made?
Well, I think you got to go back and look at what are you trying to get out of this stuff anyway? And the ashwagandha's purpose is sedative. And so that's impacting the behavior, the natural performance of the horse. And to me, that only makes sense why then we should be concerned about it, whether or not we have any particular studies on that product in the horse.
I know Dr. Schumacher, safety is a concern with some of these substances when there is an absence of that research. If there's a concern that this may not be something that we have tested in a species, we may not know the limits. And I know that you've talked to me about that before. Does that kind of fit with some of these products?
Absolutely. We don't know that they're safe to begin with, whether or not they're efficacious, but we just don't know if they're safe. And so, there may be a potential for that substance to have an impact on the horse, whereas we don't know if the safety, and we also don't know if it's actually efficacious. So the flip side of that argument would be to allow everything until it causes 100 horses to die, and I don't think that's where we want to go either.
I think our social license to operate would stop us long before that as well. I mean, that's important too. When you look at it, if people not in the horse world, they hear these conversations and they're like, why are they having to use all these sedatives, drugs, or natural supplements for these horses to compete? I had a question. It was a supplement that was supposed to calm a mare down, and the reason was it was bucking their kid off. And I'm like, and you're going to trust that some herbs are going to fix this problem? It's like, don't you like your kid? Why don't you get it a better horse? Right? Like I don't get it. And I do like to think about the wider world, and bad publicity is not something the horse world needs any more of right now.
I think most of what we have left is really highly specific to individual substances and situations. And I know that usually in those cases, Dr. Schumacher, you prefer that people correspond with you directly, so you make sure you have all the nuance. And we did actually have somebody ask, like, is that still the best policy? If I have a question about a supplement, should I still call you guys if I have something specific in my hand that I'm not sure about?
Absolutely. And you can call the 1-800 number, and then you can also email us at metaquestion@aol.usef, I'm sorry, at usef.org. So those would be the best two ways to get information or to pose a question.
Great. And anybody that had a question that I didn't get to, we had quite a lot come in. I'll either be working with Dr. Schumacher for the medical stuff, or I'll connect you to anybody that that I need to get your questions answered. But thank you all for attending. We really appreciate you taking the time, and hope that you have a great evening.
Thank you.